of July 20th, 2021. Let me first introduce the members of the Planning Board. To my extreme left over here is Von Dugan. Next to Von, Peter Goodwin, Mike Hodder. To my right is John Thurston, Brad Harriman, who is the representative from the Board of Selectmen, and Julie Jacobs, who is an alternate. Julie, would you be willing to sit in Susan Replier's place tonight? Oh, okay.
Yes, I will.
All right, great. Okay, this is actually a work session, so we have quite a long list of issues that we need to deal with. So we'll get started right away. The first one is a discussion of the go-to-meeting post from sent to me by Suzanne Ryan, and she was concerned because she feels that since we've gone away from the way that we did the meetings during COVID, that's kind of an inconvenience for members of the public. And so she's asking for us to reconsider and allow members of the public to either call in or appear by video or something of that nature. Tavis, could you speak to that issue, please?
I can speak to that issue to the extent I'm aware. The board has every option to continue go-to-meeting under certain parameters. If the board wanted to have go-to-meeting and have people be able to log in and watch a meeting, that would be fine. It would also be fine, as I understand, for an applicant to have their engineer or representative present to the board through that format. What the board cannot do is take public comment or testimony from the go-to-meeting format, whether it be by phone or by video chat, if you will. And the reason for that is there's no way to know who else is in the room. So people can say, I'm alone in the room, but you can say that if you're under duress as well. So my general recommendation to the board is to encourage people to watch YouTube or TV. If the board wants, we can go back to having go-to-meeting broadcast. It also makes it easier, as I understand, in some cases for doing minutes and things like that after the fact. But as far as conducting business, I do not believe it's appropriate for the board to do so now that the governor's order has been lifted.
Okay. What about for issues like public input? I mean, are you suggesting that people could send you an email and you could read it or something of that nature?
If the public wanted to comment on a public hearing item or something and weren't able to attend, I would suggest that people send me an email or send the board member an email and have it read into the record that way.
Okay. All right. So board members, do you have any thoughts on this issue?
I second what Tavis has to say. I think it's a thorny issue, and we should just be guided by the most conservative advice we can find.
Okay.
I would suggest that during the emergency proclamation from the governor, it was a very good way to do things. At the same time, as suggested, you don't see who's in the room, you don't see what's going on outside, and so therefore, I think if someone speaks, they should be in a public forum rather than in sort of, in many ways, a private forum. I would agree with what Mike seconded.
Okay, all right. Anyone else? Go ahead, Julie.
I think it still needs to be recorded, however is best for Mary Jane to pick it up later. If go-to-meeting's the easiest way, then it should be recorded that way as well as doing the TV, so she has an accurate recording to work from.
To record it by go to the meeting?
Yes, that way she can access it.
Well, there's any number of ways that we can create a digital recording of the meeting other than go-to-meeting. So that's something I'll work with MJ on doing minutes.
Televised.
Yeah, it's televised and it's on YouTube, but anyone that does a lot of minutes, it's very difficult to advance. You know, I only want to heard the last 3 things Vaughn said. I didn't want to artificially go back 35 seconds and then wait to hear where I was. So
Don't we have a little handheld recorder anymore? We used to.
we do, but I think with the technology up in the balcony, it'd be even easier to get an audio.
Okay.
I'll coordinate with that to create the recording.
Okay, all right. Suzanne, you came in after we got started, but we were just talking. The first item on the agenda was your email to me, and it seems that the board is in favor of keeping things as they are. And if you have comments, you just need to get them to Tavis or something before the meeting. So anyway, so do we need a motion or can we just, okay.
We'll just
All right,
continue
but-
as we're going.
No, I don't believe you need a motion because what's becoming tricky for people is to remember what it was like just before COVID. So that's all we're going back to is what the law has always been.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
We're just continuing on the way we have been going. We don't need a change, so we don't need a motion.
Okay, all right. But thank you for bringing that to our attention, and we will continue on. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the CIP presentation. Tavis, you sent us a CIP guideline, and we talked about this at the last meeting. I wasn't sure. Did you have something else you wanted to add about CIP?
I only put this on after we discussed you wanting to update the board on the presentation to the budget committee. That's why that was on there. So if there's-
That's right, yeah, okay. All right, yeah, after the presentation, well, when we finish the CIP, the first thing we do is bring it to the planning board. After that, we then go on to the Board of Selectmen, and now we're further going to go on and meet with the Budget Committee so that they know firsthand exactly what CIP has done and the reasons that we have taken the action that we have. So, excuse me?
Was that a handout that we were supposed to, no?
I got nothing in my packet either.
No, there wasn't anything. That's just
I think it's just a verbal
for
update.
your information. Okay, so anybody have any questions about that? Okay, all right. Let's see, the charrette update. Vaughn and is on the Heritage Commission, and Tavis were at a meeting. And so one of you want to give us an idea of what the change is?
Just in terms of an update, the Plan New Hampshire and the Heritage Commission have worked on a revised scope of the area for which the charrette will be envisioning more of a horseshoe now, including Center Street down to Lander Street, all of the Fossfield property, and then wrapping around this building. As far as an update, still moving forward, Heritage is working on some visual marketing materials to educate the public about the process, make people aware of the dates and things of that sort. Letters of support have been received from Planning Board, Board of Selectmen, and others to help the project move forward. And other than that, I will update you once the contract is signed. We're still looking at October 23rd or that weekend for doing the charrette. So I'll update you as things evolve.
Okay, and I did see something on Facebook about the event, so I guess that is taking place.
Couple of comments.
Okay,
The letter or recommendation from the planning board, is that something the planning board voted on or not? I don't remember seeing a letter to the charrette people, whoever they may have been, saying this is a great idea, let's go for it.
I think I submitted the letter that I originally submitted.
Correct.
Yeah,
That was a letter that was submitted?
yes.
Okay. And then could the Heritage Commission, since they're acting as point people on this, get us copies of the revised charrette, whatever documentation, so that we know, because I don't know where it's now going to be wandering around, what it's going to be looking at?
Yeah, sure. Scope will be addressed, and as well as the route and the timing, especially of the events, especially when public can take participation. Because a lot of the time is the charrette group itself. You know, they gather information and then they absorb and then they produce something and present it to the public. So there are a couple of times when the public is interacting, but a lot of the time it is the charrette team just doing the work.
Right, I understand. But my question is, can the Heritage Commission keep the planning board up to date with how things are going? Because I haven't seen anything
Yes,
for quite a while.
yes, they will.
And there's a steering committee specifically for the charrette. I think that would be more appropriate.
Right. Yep, so I'm on that. I think, Vaughn, are you on that? Oh, okay. I'm on that committee.
So we'll be getting updates as a board?
Yes, once it's available. Yes, you will.
Okay.
So have they concluded it's still a virtual?
No, it's mostly going to be in person.
It's going to be in person.
Well, that's a good change.
Yes.
Great. Okay, next item on the agenda is a discussion of the drive-through forum. We've got all of the information from the survey that we did, along with the comments, and plus some additional emails that people sent around the time, and I think maybe one of them came in after. So so everybody has got all of the information that we have related to the forum. I guess the next item is when do we want to discuss this? It seems that we need to get going on it in August or September.
Can I flush that out a little bit? Just for the public, our SurveyMonkey received 367 responses. Of those 367, something like 75 or more wrote out fairly lengthy comments on their feelings and why they were voting the way they voted. When the voting was all said and done on SurveyMonkey, 290 said they did not want drive-through restaurants. 77 said yes, they did want drive-through restaurants. So a remarkable 79 to 21 approximately % differential, yes, no. And then when we looked at our forum, we had 43 people in attendance. 42 said no. One who had potential commercial interests in the project said yes. So again, an overwhelming majority in favor of no drive-through restaurants in Wolfeboro. We got excellent press coverage the day of and excellent press coverage in the week following. So the Granite State News did a good job for that particular forum. We got lots of coverage in social media, particularly Facebook. Lots and lots and lots and lots of comments on Facebook. Again, running overwhelmingly no, and very, very few people brave enough to say, yes, I would like to have one. It's clear that the town's response has been overwhelmingly negative. So this leaves me with the following conclusion, that we have three choices in front of us as a board when we consider drive-through restaurants. We can leave the current prohibition in the definitions exactly as written and do nothing. We can craft a new definition specifically for drive-through restaurants and their prohibition, and make it complex and understandable and stronger than what exists currently. or if we were desperately daring, permit them in specific districts. Town clearly doesn't want us to do that, leaving us with two choices: how best to deal with the town's overwhelming response against. Do nothing, leave it exactly as it stands now, or make it stronger.
Did you say there were 3 options? What was
Well,
the
the third was to permit drive-through restaurants somewhere in town, but clearly the town is opposed to that. So that would not be doing the justice to the town to pursue that route, I don't think. We'd probably get hanged if we tried.
Okay, the crux of what I took away was the woman that talked about the trash and that type of a drive-through establishment that we all know is a franchise, and we know we don't have the ability to restrict a franchise from moving into a town. And the reason that we decided not to restrict them is because we knew it wasn't a legal approach, and we couldn't discriminate against one business or another. So we came up with architectural design guidelines to give us that backstop. So if and possibly when a regular franchise restaurant decides they want to come here, we really don't have any ability to stop them. They could have a restaurant that wouldn't have a drive-through window, and they could probably act as a regular restaurant establishment. So the idea that we don't need them, I think, has to be a cautionary tale, because there's no way that we can stop them. We can obviously stop them from having a drive-through, but the other conundrum is lately you've seen a lot of backup from Dunkin' Donuts out into Main Street. Just about every time I go by there, it's out into Main Street. But the other conundrum is you can drive to Ossipee, and it's the same thing happening. The backup is all the way out into the Route 16. So you have to ask, why are so many people going to the place? And that's so when you think about that, you say, well, obviously there's a draw and people want to go there. I understand the comments, but like I said, it just puzzles me a little bit that there's a lot of people that go there, and I respect everybody's views that want to preserve the town, but hopefully our architectural design guidelines and our public will come if something like that develops.
I have to remind you that we've had 2 public votes on this issue in the past, in both cases 2-1, again, opposed to drive-through restaurants. There's no argument that they appear to be popular, but there is also no argument that they appear to be very unpopular here in the town with the town's residents. And we answer to them, and our zoning is designed to protect their interests. So yes, there's a big demand for them wherever they show up, but no, these people who live here don't seem to want one. So we kind of have to be guided by their choices, because they're the ones who elected us to do a job on their behalf. Something else to consider, from what I understand, the business models that drive-through restaurants are now looking at as a result of the pandemic are moving more and more towards less human handling of the product and more automation. And sit-down interior restaurant portions are not high on at least one of the drive-through restaurant chains' list of desired characteristics for their future builds. They're looking for multiple ingress and outgress exits. You can have 2 or 3 drive-through windows, everything essentially automated inside, with very few people and no sit-down. So the idea that if they wanted to come in, they simply would come in, I think is a little more complex when you think about it for a number of different reasons. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Okay.
I'd like to add that there was some statement that the drive-through restaurant is going to make things much easier for the contractors. And I actually think that the way that many of our businesses are set up may actually be more efficient for those people to get their food quickly as compared to driving through Dunkin' Donuts or some other place. The other thing I would notice is, or I would suggest, is that when those people have to get out of their trucks or cars or whatever, go into the store, they're going to meet other people and actually have conversations, and it is probably going to be useful for them and a better interaction than sitting in your car and complaining that everything's going too slowly. So I have this feeling that many of the stores in town are catering to the people who want fast food, and perhaps they're even providing it faster.
Okay.
So my reason for thinking that we should have a forum was the argument that the last two times the town actually voted on fast food restaurants was through a warrant article, and we did not recommend it, partly probably because our ordinance says that we should not. So I thought it would be good to hear what the public had to say. We are public representatives. And I hear overwhelmingly that the public does not want this. We've had two surveys, the last master plan and the one before that, that said the public did not want it. So I'm a public official. I'd have to say we should just let it rest.
Okay, all right. Okay, any other comments? Then, Tavis, can we put this on the agenda in August for the work session or September? What?
To do what? I mean, if
Mike is talking about strengthening, and I think we need to have a discussion and,
okay, I just, because if we were going to do nothing, then there's,
right,
Well, we haven't decided that.
yeah,
that's right.
yeah, right.
So what the thread I'm willing, or I think needs to be pulled is revisiting the definitions and perhaps making them stronger. And I will work on that for the August or September work session.
Okay, all right, that's great.
One of the things that jumps to mind is the definition of carryout, because one of the things that Peter just touched on with the model being designed to provide, we'll call it faster food, really, I mean, the carryout model is becoming more pervasive than the sit-down model for any number of reasons, including COVID. So we may want to think about what a carryout restaurant really means. So if you call Louis and ask for 2 slices to go, and you show up, it's in a box, is he now carryout? By current definition, that's arguable. And I think to help strengthen it, we have to be very specific about what makes carryout separate and distinct from drive-through.
Okay, all right, so
That's what will come back.
we'll all ponder that and be ready for the discussion in August or September.
I have to question what you're trying to get at, because every time you call a restaurant and they put it in a container and you carry it out the door, it's the same for every restaurant.
But restaurant carryout is only allowed in certain zones, but most restaurants are now doing it.
Okay, all
Put your
right.
pondering hat on.
I mean, basically anybody can put it in a box and you can take it out. I mean, it's even if they're technically, I don't even know what the zones are right off the top of my head, but I mean, if you were in that other zone, come on, you're gonna throw it in a box and carry it out.
I'll go through the definitions in more detail at the August meeting.
Yep.
Okay, all right, great.
Perhaps bring in what other towns have done in response to this sort of pressure.
Okay, update on TRC. This At the TRC meeting the other day, Dave Ford, Public Works Director, was not in attendance, and he hasn't been in the last several meetings. And I've, as a member of the committee, only I'm just sitting there listening, but I really have always valued his comments over the years, and I've worked with Dave for quite some time. So anyway, I asked Tavis about it. Tavis said it was really something I needed to take to Jim Pinio, which I did. And Dave, according to what Tavis told me, Dave has determined that his review of applications going to the planning board is not needed. And what I said to Jim is, unfortunately, I don't agree with that decision. I think we're missing, a major part of some of our review of site plan and subdivision without his comments. And then I went on to say, with all of the attention to stormwater runoff on properties being developed, his advice is needed even more to make certain the stormwater runoff is being dealt with. So then I had a memo back from Jim explaining that Dave is managing millions of dollars worth of critical municipal infrastructure project with many more on the horizon. I have no doubt that Dave has provided the planning board with excellent advice. And what Jim is suggesting is that it seems to him that the development projects which require BMPs for the management of stormwater runoff should be the burden of the developer, which it is. But then he said that he would talk to Tavis and Dave about this, but I sort of have the feeling that this is kind of the end of the discussion. But also, Jim has said that, we need something in our budget to cover this line item so that projects that need to be reviewed by a public works director or someone with similar qualifications are actually done. So what Jim is suggesting is that we put it in our budget. And so that's why I wanted to bring this issue to your attention. Yep.
I think one of the reasons that Dave made the determination he did to not attend TRC is that there has long been a history of the Public Works Director doing a lot of, I'll say, private engineering work, helping the applicant come up with a solution to the issue in order to make it something the planning board can review. I don't entirely agree with Dave's position not to attend TRC, because I think the one piece that I agree that the applicant should be bearing the cost of the engineering and having that work done. And through the planning board, the applicant is also responsible for reimbursing any town expenses to double check that work that goes to the board. But without Dave Ford being part of the TRC discussion, what the board doesn't know is if the town system that will be receiving said stormwater in one form or function or another can be handled by the existing town infrastructure. So I think perhaps, and we'll get to stormwater a little bit later on here, I think it is critical to make sure someone at the town level is making sure if the planning board is looking at an infiltration basin with an overflow and that overflow is going into town infrastructure, we have to know if that infrastructure is appropriate to handle that rate and quantity of flow. So, I mean, I understand stepping away to not get sucked into designing a project for, Vaughn's project.
Yeah.
But I think the town does have a responsibility to make sure the town knows what flow it's receiving from a stormwater.
Right.
It may even relate to streets. You know, is this really the best location to take an access for the subdivision or an access to this commercial project? We just, specifically at TRC, need to make it very clear that Dave is there to provide input from the town side as guidance to the planning board, not to the applicant.
Right.
So I think this is just a symptom of a larger problem in the town, and that is we sometimes ask town employees to do 3 jobs instead of 1. And we should be careful to pay them according to the amount of work that they do, and we should appreciate it. And there's a lot of the problems, and people complain about it constantly, is inconsistent enforcement, change of leadership. We have a lot of turnover in this town. And I think it has to do with the fact that we are not appreciating the jobs being done by the employees of the town. And so I think we should take a better look at they're going to other towns generally. So what the other towns are compensating them for, what we're asking them to do, so that, if that's part of the job, it should be clearly defined and they should be compensated for it. I think, having one person responsible for, 3 jobs, let's say, it's nonsense.
Right. Go ahead, Mike.
I share your concerns, Vaughn, but I suggest that this is not the venue for them. We're just a planning board. Those kinds of questions should be directed, and properly so, to the select board and to the town manager, compensation packages and workloads and so on. I find this very disturbing because TRC, as part of site plan review, relies on the expertise of departmental heads involved in the site plan review process to provide the planning board with impartial and, I guess, in a way, partial to the town information and analysis on the impact of projects that we're going to be looking at, potentially approving, and then seeing build out. And goodness knows, if a mistake is made along the way, the town suffers as a result because the project is not as good as it should have been. We have only one engineer in the TRC process. He is a town employee. One can assume that he has the town's interests in mind when he looks at the project and comments and analyzes it, comments it on it to the planning board. Absent his input, what do we have? If we go off to buy ourselves a consultant, that man is working for hire. He'll do as good a job as we pay him to do, and he feels like doing, but we will never have the same confidence in his work output that we would in our own town engineer's work output. The engineer who has to live with everybody, talk to the planning board, talk to the board of selectmen, talk to the budget committee, and deal with his own departments. He has a vested interest in the wholeness of the town. Absent him on TRC, we're left floundering. I find this very disturbing, and I have no solutions. I agree with Vaughn. I know Dave. He has been working like a Trojan for an awfully long time. I don't know what he does on TRC because I'm not a member of TRC, but if he is actually reviewing application or applicants' engineering, doing free engineering work for them, that's, I don't know, maybe that's the way TRCs are run in other towns, but it sounds to me like he's working for nothing to the benefit of an applicant. Perhaps it's in the best interest of the town that he do so, but on the other hand, the applicant's getting the benefit of expert engineering advice for free. That may be not a good idea. Somewhere along the line, I'd like to see Dave stay on TRC, maybe not be quite so engaged in the work that he does with the applications that come before him, but I sure would like not to lose his input, because I found it to be invaluable.
And one of the things I want to toss out, you have to remember when things go to TRC, they're typically in a non-binding TRC. So a lot of the critical information that Public Works Director or the town engineer, I want to keep names out of it, would be able to review hasn't been done yet. For example, if we were to have an engineer participate in the TRC for the recent boat storage project, that consisted generally of, I want to extend this driveway and put two buildings over here, and there's going to be some stormwater over there. What does TRC think? Where it becomes much more interesting is when the full site plan review packet comes in and there's a stormwater report, a maintenance schedule, and some quantities of flow. That is the document that an engineer can benefit from reviewing. So yes, you absolutely as a board can get that from a third-party engineer. We do that all the time.
Understood.
But what we don't have is the third party only knows what's on the plan. The third party doesn't know what it's going into or what the capacity or its abilities of that town infrastructure is. And that, again, that's the missing link without Public Works having some input on that. It might be that the system meets all of the stormwater regulations, but the overflow hurts the town. That we don't know without that input. So it's also true many times for the fire department input. Until we know exactly what that building's going to be, one of the benefits of moving the design guidelines into the site plan process is someone has to have a much more complete idea of what the building is going to be so that we can have some decent feedback from the fire department. The same is true, of course, of the Public Works Department and others. So it's what information is available when, to Vaughn's point, to maximize the benefit of, to Mike's point, the vested official looking at enough information to inform the board. Does that make sense?
Yeah, basically, we're in agreement. We are not particularly happy with the current development.
Is it possible to make his recommendation process more streamlined? As in, it's stated that he hasn't been at these meetings, but is it necessary that he is? We end up making decisions based on what the Conservation Commission recommends, but I don't recall any time that a member of the Conservation Commission has been here at a meeting, listening to the hearing and whatever. And so therefore, there is a written report which comes in, which may end up being less time-consuming and equally as effective. It may also be that if the particular direction or issues which should be addressed are defined more clearly and perhaps more precisely, those are what would be reported rather than perhaps lots of other things.
If I use an analogous process, when when building permit plans are submitted for a new single-family home, a complete packet of that home, soup to nuts, goes to every department head, and every department head has to sign off. Or, if not sign off, I'm willing to sign off as long as A, B, and C are addressed. That way, when the building permit is issued, you have all of the relevant comments from the department heads. That is the more typical scenario I've worked with. There may be a TRC committee that reviews an application where someone says, I'm generally thinking of doing this. What's the feedback? You get that feedback and you move on. But then when the application comes in, the other way to get comments, more appropriate comments perhaps for the board, would be to send a copy of that plan set out to each department head, perhaps only the same that are on TRC, but that way they actually have a packet. They have some information and relevant comments can be shared with the planning board, even if it's no comment. There's plenty of time from application to planning director review to packet preparation for that to evolve. And if the board is interested, I can work with the town manager on prepping the department heads, the appropriate department heads for that.
I think that might be a good thing to do.
Okay.
So you're saying once the application comes in, then you would send it out to whoever?
Somebody hands Terry a giant pile of paper. I determine if I believe it is complete. I don't want to say determine complete because that's a different thing, but I believe all the relevant pieces are there. A copy can then be sent even electronically to the department heads for comments. We get comments back. What I'm most used to is if the electric department says, well, the pole has to be moved 15 feet to the west, my recommended conditions at the bottom of the report are going to express those department comments
Okay,
if they are not addressed by the time the planning board is done reviewing the proposal.
okay.
There are plenty of projects, though, where the planning board is not involved at all. I don't see why you would take a typical house, let's say, lot somewhere, and make the planning board review it if the planning board,
I'm not, that was the analogous process.
okay.
So all the department heads have a sign-off and a written comment period for something as simple as a single-family home. We don't do that for site plan review or subdivision, which is a bit odd for me.
Isn't it a little bit more efficient if the department heads can get their packets and review them when they have time, rather than having to show up to a specific meeting at a specific time if they're not really needed? It's just my feeling, because we get to take ours home and read it over the weekend.
Absolutely, and that's what I'm suggesting. It could simply be an email, let me know if you have any comments on the following projects. I could even build, think of it the way you used to get the agendas during COVID. Here's a link to the materials, let me know if you have any comments on these projects. You know, if I don't have a response by this date, planning board will be told there are no comments and assume that all is well.
Having never been to a TRC meeting, is the applicant actually at the meeting?
Yes,
Is there a benefit from the applicant and the department head seeing each other?
Conceivably, but the point I was trying to bring up is that at TRC, it might just be a sketch on a piece of paper. So I'm gonna put a building behind the house over on, you know, Bay Street. Well, based on this, typically, no, we don't have any comments, but be sure to contact A, B, C, and D as you move forward. What the planning board doesn't know is what that correspondence is, but by sending it out for comments, you know, every department head can reach out and say, just to let you know, I'm putting these comments out. Or I can say, I heard from electric, I heard from public works, these are the concerns, please address these before going to the board.
So this would be,
go ahead, John. Sure.
So what I'm hearing here is basically, from the way it was, we're changing the process. And we're changing the process, but like Julie says, the most critical aspect of this whole thing is the person who's applying, the applicant. And you have millions of dollars worth of stuff in the ground out there. I understand Dave Ford's very busy. What's the legal precedent for somebody when they go to do something and Dave Ford wasn't at the meeting and something happens? I mean, organically, stuff happens at meetings, discussion occurs, and that's how things get feted out. They don't always get feted out when everybody sends in an email and asks the question, and then things just wither on the vine. I mean, we're here to give our applicant the time that they deserve. Whether or not we have an employee that thinks that he doesn't have to be there, I think, unfortunately, we are understaffed as a town. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, this really has nothing to do with Dave. This came from Jim.
I understand that, but I'm trying to put it in the mix of, it's very important, I think.
Well, I hear and understand what you're saying. To that, I would suggest, I don't know if it's beneficial for the board to have somebody appear. I understand meeting as a group, being able to hear, oh, I heard Barry say this, I heard Dave say that, I heard Kathy mention this. How do we work this project out? We don't have that level of detail or information at your typical TRC meeting.
Right.
So if the board would prefer, instead of doing the email chain, or a packet comes in, we send it out for comments, and what the process I loved is when the applicant submits materials, all the department heads put together comments. Those comments are synthesized into one document, sent to the applicant. The applicant then comes to a TRC meeting with those same people that commented, and they've shown how they address the comments on the original submittal, and then it gets scheduled for a public hearing.
that's your proposal?
Well, he was going to talk to Jim about it.
That would be my proposal, yes.
That would be an outstanding, in my opinion, proposal, because it would provide a level of detail we currently don't get from TRC reports. TRC reports are really helpful for me when I come to make a decision about whether something fulfills a zoning ordinance requirement or not, but the comments are usually very, very brief, and sometimes difficult to understand because the handwriting has been scribbled in a very, in a rush. Additional information would be very helpful. I would not want it to be in lieu of a TRC, but I would want it to be in supplementation of a TRC.
I'm really just thinking of retooling how TRC works, where it comes into the process.
Well, you're just supplementing it with additional information, making the TRC process perhaps a little easier for those who are on TRC by providing them additional information before the applicant shows up.
Correct.
That he has to answer. Then that's fine, and maybe that will reduce TRC workload, if that's the goal. It'll give us additional information that we currently don't have, which can only benefit us in the job that we do.
Absolutely.
It also helped.
Go ahead.
Getting kind of going back to the email, went back and forth with you and Jim here, Kathy. Kind of see a couple things regarding, the TRC and the stormwater, detail of it here with Public Works. One is we talked about, and he talked about in here, of hiring a consultant engineer to do a review, which I think is a good idea. We did talk about that's going to be more centered on what's on the actual plan on that piece of property there as to how the stormwater portion is working on that property, not taking into account what's going to happen when it leaves the property. And I think at that point, if we went through that route, budgeted into our budget here to have a consultant engineer review the more detailed or larger projects that involve the stormwater management, I think we'd be able to work through the Public Works Department on having a representative there anyway that could understand what's downstream from there. And if there is something, whether it's Dave or an associate of Dave's in the Public Works, if there's something that, raise an alarm, then he could, at that time, maybe bring it to Dave's attention, to take a look at, this one here looks like it could be problematic. Maybe we take a look at that one. And keep in mind, too, and Jim even mentioned in here, that last year we did try in the budget process to hire some help for Dave there in the succession plan, and also kind of rearrange his workload and his job description so that we could take a little bit more advantage of his engineering expertise and stuff, which we don't right now. He's more of Public Works, in charge of some projects and, and departments and stuff, not necessarily doing reviewing of engineering and stuff, which I can understand that would take a lot of his time to, review and look through one of the applicant's designs on there on his time frame. So my recommendation, I think, is to, seriously consider budgeting some money for its consultant engineer for that part, and try and work out a type of a plan with the Public Works to have some review there on that aspect of it too, as the water leaves the property. So I think that would kind of take care of that portion of it anyway for the TRC.
Okay, and we do have the authority to charge people for that, right, Tavis? Right. Yeah. So, it would need to be in our budget, but we could recoup those funds. Yeah. Okay.
When it comes to matters of budget, I get really, really worried because there isn't a great deal of budgetary room in the town's budget, and we're going to be asking for a new line item. And what I would not want to do is to have this board trade off something that we already have in order to get a new line item to buy something that we don't, namely consulting engineering. Something that has really concerned me is that we'll get to this later on, we don't have the funds to buy an impact fee update this year. We were told that we have to wait until next year to do the update. Next year, the man to do the update may no longer be wanting to do the update anymore. Budget is tight. It wasn't a lot of money. If we plug in whatever it's going to cost to get a consulting engineer, say 10K, are we going to have to give up something to get that additional 10K? Is it going to be in addition to our current budget? Are we going to be next year having to trade off an impact fee update cost against an consulting engineering cost?
I don't believe so, because we already have a consulting engineer.
I'm sorry?
I don't see why it would be a budgetary question at all. The town already has a consulting engineer. So when
We
an
would just
applicant,
use him, we would not need
okay.
to budget additional money for it?
correct,
Is that correct?
Okay.
because,
all right,
because
great.
those costs are borne by the applicant.
Okay,
Okay.
all right, and we get
Okay.
repaid for that, yes.
Correct.
Okay.
So we
So
would just be using
just
time
to,
on,
you know, token engineering firm submits a plan, planning board raises a question as to whether the stormwater makes sense. We're going to send this out to third party. We're going to continue the hearing to a date specific. I send that plan off to Ty and Bond. They
okay.
provide a cost for that review. We get that money in escrow. We pay that bill.
I withdraw my concern, thank you.
Okay, so,
But again, the missing piece, the consulting engineer is only looking at the plan in front of them. What we don't know is the impact of the plan on,
Yeah, and
town, and
and
that-
Brad suggests a DPW person to be there when that analysis is made, to give them input into what's coming, what's downstream.
okay, so you're going to have a conversation with Jim Pinio.
going to have a discussion with the town manager, and I'll involve you as we move forward on what the language might look like, if any changes need to occur in the TRC language and the regulations.
Okay,
I'm just checking to see that I understand. So you're projecting that the TRC gets pushed down the process further, so they have more to review after the engineering?
Yeah, the part I haven't worked through in my head is how this is going to impact the current planning board schedule that people might have been banking on for this year. So this is something that may not occur until next year. Currently, you're not, in the non-binding TRC, you're not even required to have plans necessarily. Someone can walk in and say, I'm thinking about doing this. That's sort of not I won't say waste of time. It's not an effective use of the people's time, either the TRC or the applicant. So the idea is that version typically happens when the phone call with me or a phone call with the code officer or what have you, and then they come up with plans. So we have to find the gray area between no plans and complete plans that provides enough information to get effective comments from the town officials. And then have TRC that result in comments and move.
okay, all right, so we have,
It's easier to do than it is to explain, believe it or not.
okay, all right. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the discussion of the implementation committee for the master plan. Peter Goodwin brought this to my attention that we do not have a implementation committee for the master plan. And I think we do need one in order to make sure that these items that we have listed for goals for various people are taken care of and paid attention to. So how do people feel about implementation committee, and is anyone interested in being on such a committee?
I would say that at least once a year, we should look at what's being done, and I believe that there are a number of boards which do this anyway, and so maybe much of the work would be redundant. And I have talked to a member of the select board who seems to want to have a list of what they do and check things off because it's nice to have things done. So I think that that is something which, you know, it may end up being a reasonably simple process, but also the idea that there may be somebody who's going to look to how you're checking off things and what you're actually doing along with a master plan may be a good thing to have.
Okay, so you're suggesting that this committee really would convene in October or something?
I would say that once a year is probably sufficient, but, you know, they would need to have appropriate data before they had their meeting.
Okay. All right.
Peter, are you thinking that each one of the chapter groups would have a little list, and how are they going to hand it up to the committee?
There has been a spreadsheet organized that basically gives, if you're the select board, or you're the planning board, or you're the, whoever, that this is one of the things in the master plan. And then you can say it's done, or we're working on it, or whatever.
Just for that meeting, they just hand up their paperwork and say, oh, this is what we did?
So there's a large spreadsheet with every single, topic on it, and then see how those people are doing and see how progress we have. And,
Do you think it has to be written to be kept accountable? Otherwise, everything's just going to slide.
And, some of the issues that, from the natural resources group, we suggested that, the select board needs to keep working on milfoil. That one you can check off because they still are. At the same time, there may be a much longer range recommendation that we made, which was to ensure that the drainage which goes to the town water supply is protected. Well, that may end up ultimately being a costly thing and maybe a reasonably long-term process. So if it's not done this year, we're not worried, but at least if they're aware of what's going on and moving in that direction, that would be a good thing. So I think that there's, what will happen quickly, what will happen over a long period of time.
There are a few goals that involve numbers of people, and there needs to be some forum or some group convened, because each one of those goals had, master plan, planning board, BOS, conservation commission, and unless somebody's driving the group meeting, those people who need to get together to work on the goal will not get together. So there's sort of a group scheduling process that has to occur also.
I'd actually suggest it may not be that it necessarily is a meeting that has to occur. It needs to be communication. And the way that the spreadsheet has been set up, it has all the committees involved with any particular project. And if you're talking about the watershed of the water supply, that probably includes the Conservation Commission and Department of Public Works, Select Board, and Budget Committee, I guess. And so those are all things where those committees would all be outlined as who have to work together.
Okay.
Should the committee be restricted to planning board members, or are you looking at bringing in people from the outside?
Well, I think the last committee, Linda was on it, Linda Murray, and so she wasn't a planning board member.
I would suggest that you'd like to have at least a few people other than planning board,
Right.
just because you're, it makes more sense to have a wider view.
Right. Yeah. Okay, and Tavis, the information that Peter prepared, did all of that go out to the various groups? So the Board of Selectmen have their 18 pages of master plan? Okay.
Yeah, what I did when I sent out the CIP information, so the project request form, the schedule, the guidance piece, I also included a link to the website that has each individual link. My hope is that every request that comes in has a reference to a master plan implementation item, where I'll be reaching out to the submitter and assisting.
Okay,
So
but,
in the practical matter, everything that's in the CIP should be an extension of the implementation table to a degree.
okay, all right, well, how do people want to proceed? Do you want to reach out to members of the public, find out if anybody's interested in doing this? I mean, I think we should have more than just planning board.
I'd ask, might be bold enough to ask Peter, since you seem to be taking point on this. Would you be interested in drafting a committee and then bringing its membership to the board for approval?
Oh, it would be so much fun.
Well, don't build empires.
That would be a fall project.
I think it would be a fall project. I also think that it would be, to form the committee would be in consultation with especially Kathy, who has been through the process a few times perhaps before. And at the same time, you know, may ultimately be that we would look for members of the public. But it may end up being that it would be a person who is a representative of the public.
Peter, could maybe we start with the list of people that actually helped with the master plan first and ask them first, since they've already felt an interest?
I mean, the people who are working on the committees probably should be part of it, and, you know, see how yes.
Okay, well, look, why don't we put this on the agenda again, and I'll give it a little thought. I mean, I think we need it, but we've got to get the right people involved here.
Give Peter a month and put it on for September?
Yes.
I think Julie's idea is excellent. Why don't we put out a feeler to all the people who worked on the master plan and see if anybody's interested?
Well, that's,
I like that idea.
yeah.
Tim, not me.
Not you. Sort of an email just to all the committee members.
But you might also suggest that the parameters are designed to be one meeting a year, which may end up getting more volunteers.
Am I drafting this email?
What was that?
Am I drafting this email?
I think we...
I don't have the email addresses of all the members of the committee, so that your assistance would be valuable.
We'll work on that together. And get
Okay, all right. Okay, great. Okay. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the Pine Hill let's see. Okay. What was that? Yeah, right. Pine Hill Road Development. Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Oh, okay.
Madam Chair, I'd just like to go on record to recuse myself from any discussion on this, as I
Okay.
have property up there.
Okay, all right, thank you, Brad. Oh, okay, so this item we talked about a few weeks ago. Tavis has now come up with a new Pine Hill Road Development proposed zoning amendment. Tavis, the concern that I have is that some of the things that you've added you didn't really underline, so I mean, it's not in true going to public hearing form yet. But anyway, can we go through and look at it and see if other people have?
Kathy, I thought he was just putting the old and the new together into one document.
What
isn't
this,
new, is it?
what this draft is showing is everything that Pine Hill Road Development District currently has in it, plus all of those uses from C2,
Yeah.
based on the input from,
And those are the items that are not underlined because they're all new.
Well, it's just a smash up of the
Well,
two.
no, that's the way it's done. I'm just trying to
Yeah.
get rid of
I don't
my,
feel it's
my
in the
hope for,
draft yet.
my hope for this evening was just to see if there was any any comments from the board after you've looked at it to see if there are permitted uses that should be special exception
okay.
or vice versa.
Okay, well, then,
The key points that came out of the last discussion, in my recollection, was contractor's yard being a special exception, contractor's yard light being a permitted use. The other major talking point at the last discussion is 175-96-1, special exception uses M. This is moving adult-oriented businesses into the Pine Hill. 175-53 is the adult-oriented businesses section of the ordinance, and I was asked to make it as restrictive as I thought appropriate, so I added B, no AOB to be permitted on a parcel within 1,000 feet of any other parcel having an adult-oriented business, which sort of pays homage to how that district treats contractor's yard light right now. There's nothing magic about 1,000 feet. 1,000 feet is how contractors' yards are treated. It could be 2,000 feet, it could be 500 feet.
okay, well, why did we exclude multifamily?
We didn't.
Okay,
175-96A D.
Oh, you moved it up there. I
oh, I see.
found the same thing, too.
Okay, all right.
Thank you,
Okay,
Travis.
good, thank you. Okay,
To-
then,
I tried to put like things together, so if you had residential units, I put them all together.
okay,
I would suggest that 175-96A-B is not required. But I'm trying to keep everything as consistent with every other zone so that people don't wonder why one zone looks different. State law, just for reference, says that any lot that you allow a single detached dwelling also gets an accessory dwelling unit. It really goes without saying, it doesn't need to be written, but that's how the other zones are put together.
okay, so you did add J, the storage of volatile fuels.
Yes, what I did not do is follow up with potential changes to those definitions, because I wanted to get the district solved and then work on the definition separately.
Okay,
If the board
and
wants to-
also P, the storage and use of heavy industrial or mechanical equipment and metal shops. Do we want that included? That's
Yes.
just kind of a question.
That was the original intent of the Pine Hill Road Development District.
Right, well,
Put that kind of activity there.
okay, well, we did remove industry the last, a couple of years ago and added light industry. So it just, I'm sure if that was what everybody wanted.
Okay.
And that's what, light industry is not listed in permitted uses. I'm just noticing that now.
Yes, right, that needs to be added, and industry needs to be,
Special exception.
industry I thought was out, but,
I think industry is just special exception if you look up the definition.
Yeah, it's in as a special exception in 175,
You've got all the
96.
assemblies on the left is permitted, but then when it comes to bringing in raw stuff, you jump over to special exception.
right.
Make stuff from scratch. A little different. Are we still going to be able to talk about the wording of each one of these?
Can talk about whatever you like. All I did was copy out of C2 and put it in,
Okay.
other than the multifamily that just bothered me to be by itself.
Yeah, I have.
Okay, go ahead.
Do we want to do those today, or I can just wait on some of these things?
How many do you have? I can't tell.
It's all pink. 20?
Does it look like mine?
Worse.
Worse.
Yeah. But most of mine is wording stuff and understanding the definitions, because some things we have like, the word offices, and then the next or second one down, then G in retail. Then retail goes on for 3 sentences. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. It's either one is not enough or the other one is too much. So we need a little bit of give and take here to fix our definitions.
One of the side projects I'm working on functionally speaking, there is no difference between business services, offices. There's a large number of these that we have enumerated, A through S or A through N, that are all really the same thing when you get right down to it. In terms of what's required from building code, fire code, et cetera. Even if you go back to the age-old zoning is for separation of uses, many of these uses are all the same. We just call them different things. I think it's largely a result of, we want to be clear, we don't want that, even though this is exactly the same thing, but it's not called that. So one of the projects is to look at this from a completely different perspective and say how many of these things could be coalesced, if you will.
My concern about that, if I may interrupt, Tavis, is that if you make it as concise as you're suggesting and logical as you're suggesting, and I am in sympathy with what you're suggesting you are intending, you're forgetting who's reading these zoning regulations, who they are written for. Joe Doak's going to go out and do something with his 2-acre parcel, he's going to look to see what he can or can't do. And if he sees retail and no other description, or business use and no other description, he's not necessarily going to know whether that includes offices or retail stores or his particular kind of retail. I know, yes, he can come and talk to you.
No, that's specifically why the definitions become critical.
Right.
One of the observations I've noticed in Wolfeboro is that there are many definitions that impart regulations, to harken back to the drive-through. There are also, as Julie pointed out, retail/stores and shops for the conduct of any retail business or personal service. Well, you have to know what retail business is or what a personal service is. That continues with offices, restaurants, banks, indoor theater, printing plan. It says that.
Yes.
Public recreation uses and other similar community services. Oh, wait a minute. 175-96G says public recreation and similar community services. But public parks and playgrounds are a special exception. Government buildings are a special exception. Something doesn't fit there. Those don't jive. Because how is public recreation not a public park?
I think that some of these definitions need fixing.
I can argue the distinction, but I don't know. I didn't write this, so I don't know what was in the intention of the author.
So what, I'm curious.
Wouldn't
This
public
isn't to be argumentative. What's the difference between public recreation and a public park?
Well, notice in 175-96-1G, they're all capitalized, suggesting an institutional existence, no? Institutional purpose. And in G, 175-96G, public recreation uses are lowercase, suggesting not an official purpose, a private purpose. I'm going to run a public recreation park. I'm going to have a roller coaster. Not going to be built by the town.
You're helping me with my point. So a roller coaster is a permitted use, but if the town wants to put in a public park, it needs a special exception.
Yeah. That may not be logical, but it's arguable.
My question is that where the board wants to go? That's kind of the hope for this. This is where everything shook out from the last discussion. Does this make sense?
I think this is how I see it. We're kind of in sort of an emergency situation here with this redrafting of the Pine Hill Road Development District because something that should have gone through swimmingly was held up because somewhere along the line something didn't get done the way it was supposed to have gotten done. And this is the fix. I'd like to see this get fixed with its capitalized public parks and its lowercase public recreations to be fixed subsequently. Let's get this to the voters with the big changes that are necessary that we'll talk about now. So they have something to vote on so that we can, the next time someone wants to come in and put something in that business park that is currently not allowed, they'll be allowed. That's my reasoning, to get this done now and then fine tune it later. Because we have a real big problem right now.
Well, if that's the guidance, I'm happy to go back and create the track change version of Pine Hill to do this.
Okay, can we please take out industry? Since I think we removed it.
You're going to put industry light, aren't you?
Yes, yeah. Light industry.
Where are we moving it from?
Where are you putting light industry?
Light industry was
On the
approved by
left or on the right?
voters under special exception.
So special exception 17596-1A is light industry as opposed to industry?
Then there's no place for industry at all.
Correct.
That's right.
And do we have a definition of light? We do have a definition of light industry, don't we?
Yes, we do.
Yes, but if you take out industry from the entire town, where does that leave GI Plastic or whatever their new name is?
The only reason I brought it up is I think we took it to the voters and they approved it.
They approved light industry.
But not industry, even though it's in the C2 and didn't get moved over.
That was the last time around with the voting.
So maybe instead of taking it out, we should put it back in?
No, so maybe light goes under permitted and industry goes under special exception.
Exception.
That was what I thought we had done.
I like that.
Yeah,
And
that
I
makes a
wonder
lot more
why
sense.
storage of volatile fuels is under permitted uses, but when you get to a contractor yard with fuel storage, you're over in special exception.
Yeah, I'd like to see,
Volatile fuels go.
Well, careful. 17596R is contractor's yard light. That has the same fuel protection. Frankly, it's required by law, so it's sort of superfluous to put it in here. But and I say that because you can't do fuel storage and not comply with that fact sheet and administrative rules, environmental water quality 401, best management practices. That's state law. So, and the only difference between contractor's yard light and contractor's yard heavy, quite literally, is the weight of the vehicle. So, well, it was brought up because storage of volatile fuels is a permitted use. The same storage of volatile fuels, going with the board's definition, is in contractor's yard light as a permitted use.
But why is it in permitted uses? Because it used to be?
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
I would put that over in special exception uses.
in 17596J.
J,
Yeah,
yeah.
my suggestion was going to be to move that to special exception uses, simply because there's a potential public concern there, storage of fuels, volatile fuels, server stations. I'd like to see more scrutiny in the process, rather than as simply a permitted use, and have the planning board be the only organization in town to vote it up and down.
They've got to come to the planning board for public comment.
Sure.
Right.
But if it gets a special exception, it then goes as an additional hurdle to jump through. It was one that was passed successfully by the applicant who had come here and had run into the problem that we're trying to solve now.
Okay, I thought that, yeah,
Actually, it's not solving the problem at all.
The problem being solved is a redefinition of the Pine Hill Road Development District to put back in the uses that were taken out inadvertently. That's the problem being solved.
Right, and volatile fuels moved from Pine
That's
Hill.
only one part of it. I mean, what we have currently is everything's in C2, where none of this could possibly exist. So we're putting it back into Pine Hill Road Development District. That's the solution. This is one part of it. That's how I see it.
Okay,
Can I say something?
Yep, go ahead.
Wasn't the application presented with all the characteristics that it had supposed to? And the reason that they had to go to get a ZBA approval was the fact that it wasn't in the location where it was supposed to be in the first place. So to me, I don't think the process was wrong. I just think that the fact that the volatile fuels wasn't in the permitted use or understood to be in that area.
It wasn't allowed because it wasn't, we have permissive zoning. If he doesn't say you can do it, you can't do it. And it didn't say he could do it, so he couldn't do it. So he had to go to the ZBA to get permission to do it. Then he's coming back here to get us to look at how he wants to do it and then get our input as to where we think he ought to be able to do it or not.
Sounds like a lot of running around. Why couldn't we just have him come to the application that night and give the presentation, and then if there's any questions or comments, the public can make their point in case, and we can move on. It seems like we're grinding people up here for a lot of nothing.
Well, no, it was not a lot of nothing.
At that time, if you're conflating the two applications, there's no way of addressing the concern, John. The original application came, and it did not have, in this board's opinion, a permitted use that it could hang its hat on, so it was sent away to the ZBA. Under this current iteration, should this pass, and should J be moved into special exception, then they would go to ZBA for a special exception. Getting that, they'd come here for a planning board site plan review. And that would only concern, I mean, look at the uses that we have on special exception now. Those are ones that require a particularly extra bit of oversight by the town. And if you do not feel that storage of volatile fuels, gas stations, and garages need some additional town oversight, then, I mean, I don't know what does. Just think of the potential damage to the water table if a volatile fuel storage container should be accidentally damaged during distribution or delivery.
You're discrediting the engineer and the application that's going to come in front of us, I'll be honest with you. I mean, they're doing all the technical analysis before it comes to us. What are we? Are we all professionals on the volatile fuel and all the technical aspects? I mean, that's where I come down.
Okay, but that's another.
We don't have to be.
An application that's coming to us. I don't think we should be discussing that. But what I would like to discuss is Article 5 from 2020, where we did remove storage and use of heavy industrial and mechanical equipment.
Say that
So
again, Kathy?
That one needs to come out.
Say that again?
Can I see that? Not to doubt you, I just want to read it.
Yeah, I know.
I guess I'm somewhat lost on the idea of which of the 8 special exception criteria address the concerns that were posed. I don't want to talk about that project anymore. And by the same token, my understanding of the Pine Hill Road Development District, it was originally the industrial park.
Yeah.
And the first one that went in was about the biggest dose of all the fuel storage you could think of.
Storage, it reads. Storage
And that was
use
what
of
Pine
heavy
Hill was to
industrial and
emulate,
mechanical
and now we're
equipment. It doesn't say
removing the industry and
Mechanical.
conceivably removing volatile
Heavy
storage.
Industrial.
That has to go.
Yeah, that's
What you're talking about, industry.
oh,
Thank you. That does have to go.
I do have a couple of words that I do want to add. We're on the right page, 96.1. What's the difference between a cemetery for a human being and a cemetery for a pet? Shouldn't that read cemeteries for human beings and pets, or pets?
I thought you were going to point out the other thing where C and J are the same.
They're the same.
And J?
J is the
Yes.
Cemeteries for human beings is listed twice.
It is, and go one above that to I. We've also got hospitals for treatments of only humans, not aliens, not pets, only humans. Is there anywhere in the town of Wolfeboro that we can have a veterinarian?
Yes. Not here.
okay, any other,
Yes.
okay, go ahead.
No, it's listed as a use.
And do I have the floor?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. In 17596I, Originally in that, when it was in C2 and then earlier, there was a 150-foot setback from a state highway. And that's not in this section of the ordinance as suggested to us.
You're correct. I did not carry over the footnotes. I wasn't going to go through the footnotes until it was decided where things were going to land. I can go back and put in all the footnote references to go with these.
All right, so that'll go back in?
If it's relevant, yes.
If it's who?
If the board believes it's relevant, yes.
All right, originally in I-17596I, there was a 150-foot setback from the state highway.
Correct.
As part of the requirement. It's not currently in the text that you see in front of you. We want it back in.
Yes.
Which one are you talking about, Mike? Which,
17596I,
Storage.
number 1?
I.
961?
No,
96? 96I?
Storage
Equipment and
facilities.
warehouse and wholesale distribution facilities?
Yes.
And
Originally, there was a
something
150-foot setback
Setback
as a
from the
requirement,
road.
correct?
Yes, and that was part of the notes, and it should be in.
And it should be in.
Yes.
Okay, so that's in.
Yeah.
17596J, I would like to see that in special exception. If we've got public utility lines, public parks, libraries, and AOBs under special exception, and I guess light industry when we get to it, I don't see why we would not have something like a gas station or storage of volatile fuels. 2 10,000-gallon tanks of diesel also require a special exception. An extra board's eyes on the application. Yes, it's additional hurdle for the applicant to jump through. It's another application fee. It's paying the lawyer to argue before another board. So there are costs involved to the applicant. That's understood. But the use proposed is one that could be important to the town, both pro and con, and certainly would make a big difference in the town if something unforeseen happened, or if it was simply abused. And I would like to see that in special exceptions. That's my argument.
Well, I'm sorry to disagree with you, and I would make a motion to allow J to stay in the permitted uses.
Okay, second. Okay, sorry, John, I don't see a second.
Then I'm going to make a motion in that case. Do I need to make a motion? I don't want to make a motion. No, that's my suggestion. The board can decide whether they want to do it or not, but that's what I think we ought to be doing. And then to continue on, if I may.
Should we continue with that particular issue rather than moving on?
I'd be happy to.
I think we should decide this one now rather than talk about other things.
I guess I'm somewhat confused between the emergency need to update the district to capture the C2 uses and not make any other changes, and now you're making changes without any further discussion.
I'm sorry, I did not gather any of that.
What I was originally asked to do was to take the permitted uses from C2 and put it in the permitted uses in Pine Hill and the special exception uses from C2 and move it into Pine Hill because of the so described emergency need to get Pine Hill updated, and we weren't going to review your words.
Not critical, Tavis. I'm not trying to be critical. I'm trying to express a concern. If the board doesn't share it, then I'll withdraw it.
No. I think it's fine. I think it's just as relevant to fix some of the wording that doesn't make sense if we're going to go down that path.
I can second that because I see people every day that are complaining from not just us town, but other towns that they can't understand any of this stuff. They'll read, something for, I've got plans and I got to do this, and what does this say? Because a lot of sentences don't make any sense.
And what does this board want to do regarding J, storage of volatile fuels, et cetera? Do you want to leave it where it is? Or
Just a second, she just seconded. What did you just say?
she was seconding what Tavis just talked about language being important.
Okay.
I would second moving storage of volatile fuels into special exceptions if, in fact, playgrounds have to be in that area too.
That's the question.
Also,
Okay, so there's been
not use that as an argument, because I think there are some of these things that need to go back to
Yes.
permitted. Because I would put E, F, G, I, K, and L in permitted. I see no harm, no foul that needs to be reviewed for special exception. I would put light industry in permitted, industry in special exception. I think the volatile fuels goes to special exception.
Can we stick with that just for now?
That's a,
I would vote to move J, storage of volatile fuels, into special exceptions.
Are you moving it?
I would
or-
move that.
Okay, all right, okay. You want to second the?
I'm not going to second that, no. Somebody else can second that because Peter made the
Yeah,
motion.
okay, all right. Okay, I'll second it.
Okay.
All in favor of moving J, storage of volatile fuels, garages and filling or service stations, et cetera, to special exception use? Please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, and one abstention, and two abstentions. And you've recused yourself, that's right. He's recused himself, Brad has recused himself, and John is abstaining. Okay.
All right, I'm not quite done, but I'll be quick. Just want to confirm with Tavis that that all of the state rules, administrative rules, BMPs, and the NHDES fact sheets, water managements, and ENVWQs, those are all current, and will they remain with those numbers for the foreseeable future, or is there any way of referring to these documents in a generic way that would not render them moot should they be renumbered, which I've seen happen any number of times?
I'll look into that and come back with a recommendation.
All right, and then the last point I need to make is on 17596.1M, adult-oriented businesses. A, 17553. 17553 is unfinished. It was never completed as an ordinance regarding the adult businesses. I have spent some time in those weeds. Didn't really enjoy that, but nonetheless, there's all kinds of requirements that are necessary to go into protecting the town from the way AOBs are operated, including license requirements, protections for performers, believe it or not, allowed practices, hours, signs, content of signs, interior layouts. These are all recommendations from other zoning boards that should be in an AOB regulation to protect the town. They're currently not in ours. So when we refer to 17553, we should make sure we have a properly designed 17553 to protect the town, and we currently don't.
I would
And
be
that's all I
happy to
have.
come up with draft language on the adult-oriented businesses ordinance for you.
Okay.
Oh, okay,
Thank you.
Vaughn, did you want to make your suggestions?
so my other suggestions were that light industry, and it has to be defined, of course, is in a permitted uses, and industry stays in special exceptions. And then I think under special exceptions, E, F, G, I, K, and L should go under permitted uses.
Okay. Is that okay with everyone?
Yes.
I don't, I'm not agree, those are large-scale projects. I mean, if you looked, I would take Was G included there, parks?
Yeah.
I would just take parks out and put it in permitted uses, but government buildings, nonprofit educational institutions, you could do a lot of land movement and pushing things around. Those are large footprints.
I agree with John completely on that. I think government buildings of any kind, that could be a bunch of DPW garages.
Travis has got his hand up.
Okay, go ahead, Davis.
By statute, government uses of property don't have to come to the planning board. The planning board may require a public hearing, but it becomes a non-binding discussion against the public entity.
So do we eliminate that one?
You could eliminate E, F, G, H, K.
Why would we eliminate F?
I'm not
We
going to
have-
assume that every nonprofit educational institution is a government entity.
Not all of them.
necessarily.
No, not necessarily.
Cato Institute.
It can be a private
If I
entity.
said F, I didn't mean to. That would need to stay.
I'm sorry?
Okay,
I didn't mean to include F.
Okay, F would stay in
E-
special exception.
E, G, H, K can come out entirely under that
Yeah,
statute.
H has to go.
Correct.
What about K, libraries and museums?
Yep.
No, the libraries and museums could be private.
Well,
In this town.
are we
museums are
saying,
private.
that exactly. Well, I'm going with your capital L for a, I think K should be split up.
Yes.
It's libraries, like public libraries or town-owned libraries, and then museums. I don't know what "and the like" means, especially
Take
after
it out
last
then.
night's discussion.
Sounds
but
like
that's
la
a
la
different
la.
topic.
Yeah,
Take it out then.
yeah, la la la, take it out.
That's, yeah, and the like is wiggle language, but on the other hand, we may need at one time to wiggle.
What's like a museum? I'm not being argumentative. I'm trying to think of what's like a museum.
That can be used,
They're in Holderness, the something Animal Science Center or something. What's the name of that place?
Swan Lake Science Center, you've got,
That's private.
yeah.
Taxidermy shop? No, that would be, that's commercial.
Depends on the age of the animals.
I mean, I think it can be used both ways. Somebody could use that as I'm calling my stuff and alike. Right?
Not even 9 o'clock yet.
Hoarders. It's
Yeah.
like a museum.
Well, no, you could have a collection of Elvis Presley dolls, you know, whatever you have.
I think it's dangerous to have it in. If we want to be solid, we stand behind our wording.
So we're going to get rid of and the like.
I think they need to argue that it's a museum instead of saying it's and the like.
Yeah, you didn't watch the meeting.
So what have we done with K?
So what I'm hearing is the E, the 176, 90, 175, 96, 1, E is out.
Yes,
G is out.
the permitted uses, or just out,
They're
period?
just out, period.
You don't even have say over them is where I'm going.
yeah.
Oh, it's public, yeah, okay, thank you.
Right.
So H is out.
Yes.
Yep,
K becomes libraries only and is out. Perhaps it becomes public libraries. And then museums becomes K.
Yes.
And the like is up to the board.
I think we get rid of it.
Let's just go with museums.
museums becomes K.
And why is nonprofit housing for the elderly over here?
Oh, I was dealing with the government property first, or the government projects first.
Yep.
I think L, my recommendation is to make it a permitted use. I don't think the town needs to have
Make what a permitted use? Which one?
No, that's a.
L,
that's a lot.
nonprofit housing for the elderly in those portions of town served by water and sewer by special, well, but see,
This may all become moot anyway if we do a revision of all of our housing ordinances. We'd just be taking that out anyway.
correct. So L could come out.
You want to leave it in for now?
I would leave,
Put it over to permitted.
I would leave nonprofit housing for elderly into permitted.
Permitted uses.
Should be for the elderly and affordable.
That's a large footprint, again.
Remember the zone we're talking about.
Why can't it be permitted, John, if it's a large footprint?
Well, because
Still gonna look at
I'm
it.
using Mike's analogy that if this is a large footprint, there could be an additional screening to make sure everything is proper.
No, John has a point there.
Okay, so you want to,
Leave it, I would suggest we leave it
Special,
as a special exception. I think we need to get rid of the language that goes in those portions to the end of that sentence, simply because there is no water beyond Bay Street.
So L, I will renumber this, but libraries is out, museums gets a slot, and then nonprofit housing for the elderly.
and affordable.
Well, okay, elderly, affordable workforce. I mean, we could add all the bells and whistles in there.
Affordable workforce and nonprofit housing.
I wonder why we have, with site review by the planning board, of course we'll have site review.
And it's irrelevant, I mean,
Yeah, because they're
we'll take
absolutely
out in
irrelevant.
those portions of town served by water and sewer, and take out special exception because it's already in special exception.
Just delete everything from in those to the end of that sentence.
Correct. The other fun one that's in here, 17596 1N, accessory structures and uses for the above. I know why it's in there. It does clarify some questions that have been in front of the ZBA recently. I would think that if you were getting, hear me out, if you were coming in to put in a boatyard and you wanted an accessory structure, you would not need two special exceptions.
Right, that's true.
You're already in for a special exception.
All right.
However, if you had a boatyard with no accessory structures and you wanted one,
Then you need to,
you would need a special
then
exception.
leave it in.
Okay.
It has to stay in. Question, we've added into permitted uses light industry, is that correct?
That's what I've heard, yes.
Okay, that was one suggestion. And then in special exception uses, we've just kept A, industry.
I haven't heard an answer on that. I
Okay,
heard a
well,
suggestion, but they haven't.
light industry is permitted by special exception. That's what the voters passed in 2020.
Can you read the entire sentence on that so we have the context?
Yep. To allow light industry is permitted by special exception, and removing kennels and industry as uses permitted by special exception.
Light and regular industry, whatever the definition distinction is, both go in special exception because of town vote.
There's no allowance, according to Kathy, for industry. And there's only allowance by special exception for light industry. Is that correct?
That's what we proposed in,
That's Article 5?
yes. Last sentence.
Yeah, okay. To allow light industry is permitted by special exception, removing kennels and industry as uses permitted by special exception. Yeah, it's quite clear.
It was for a different area of land, though, also. So we're actually creating a district that's outside and different than what that was. So I don't have a problem with fine-tuning the location of light industry as in a permitted use. It's a much larger parcel down there.
Well, that Article 5 referred specifically to Pine Hill Road Development District.
You didn't read that.
Let me read it.
I will read the
You
whole
read it.
thing.
Yeah.
Are you in favor of the adoption of amendment number 4 as proposed by the planning board to amend section 175-96, 175-96 Pine Hill Development District, permitted uses, special exception. Going?
No,
No,
no, we don't need to anymore. Are you,
do not remember voting on that.
but it's right there.
I mean,
Is that the same article that caused all the consternation that led to tonight?
The what?
No,
Okay.
the what?
no. That led to what we're doing tonight. That was adjusting uses in Pine Hill Road Development District.
So no industry at all anywhere,
Light industry, special exception.
which is good because we have a definition of light industry, but we haven't defined what industry is, so we'll just.
Correct.
But is that going to leave us with a problem now that we've just taken all industry out of the world?
Well, we haven't taken all industry out. We're permitting light industry by special exception.
But where is regular industry? None. None.
How do we
We
define light
voted
industry?
on it in 2020. I mean, that means this body proposed it.
So light industry is defined. The manufacturing, production, processing, fabrication, assembly, repair, or packaging of products predominantly from previously prepared or refined materials. The storage, warehousing, distribution, or wholesaling of finished products shall be considered accessory to and incidental to the light industry use. Light industry does not include uses with significant external effects as indicated below, or which pose significant risks to public health, safety, and welfare, including but not limited to storage of chemicals, poisons, pesticides, explosives, or other hazardous or toxic materials. Further, light industry uses shall not create excessive smoke, noise, dust, soot, vibration, odor, or other public nuisance, i.e. light industry has to meet the criteria for a special exception.
We don't want any of those pollutants in town. Those are industry.
No, what I'm saying is the definition of light industry
Yeah.
defines something that meets a special exception criteria.
Did you,
Oh,
Tavis, did
okay.
you say anything about raw materials, like what they're doing at the plastic factory? Because, I mean, that's not assembly, they're actually manufacturing.
The manufacturing, production, processing, fabrication, assembly, repair, or packaging of products predominantly from previously prepared or refined materials. No raw materials.
Or refined, that'd work because it's refined.
Oh, okay, how are we doing here, folks?
We're done.
Okay. All right. Okay, well, that was fun.
Yeah.
You see now why I didn't do the track changes version? Because I have to go do it all again.
Yeah, but choose different colors, make it a little bit easier on us, please.
We're going to see this at least one more time, right?
I have one question about the filter bed road. Is this attached in this section here? Is this included?
Okay, well, this is an upcoming, but do you want to jump to Filter Bed Road?
No, I don't. Go ahead.
Okay, all right. Okay. All right, the next item is the stormwater management regulations. Okay. We adopted these in 2014. Wolfeboro Waters Committee was formed about a year ago. After discussions with Matt, we met with Mitigation and the Prevention Committee of Wolfeboro Waters. And this was at Matt's request, because he felt that our stormwater regs needed some help. So we had that meeting. Peter was at that meeting, I think. We then sat down, and Matt did a regulation according to the discussion that we had had. Matt then said, okay, I'm going to send this off to a couple consultants, get their feedback. We need some money to do that. And then Matt left. Tavis was then hired. And basically, we asked him to take a look at everything, which he did. And he came back and said that he thought the regulations were confusing, and so was suggesting something else for us to look at, which we did. And so now, after that, we then decided that we should send this to Conservation Commission, the Lake Wentworth group, Wentworth Watershed Association, and Wolfeboro Waters for their review of the regulations. And so now, this is what you got in your packet. You got the review from the Lake Wentworth, or the Wentworth Watershed Association and Wolfeboro Waters. And basically, they're concerned because we all worked in 2013 and 14 pretty hard on this thing, had something, and then everybody went off on their merry way and thought we were good. And it wasn't until Matt came along and said, wait a minute, some of these things just aren't working, that we started to take a look at it again. So, but basically what the two groups that got in touch with us are saying, could we please just take a look at the existing regulations, take some of these suggestions that Tavis has suggested and incorporate that rather than throwing away everything in the, pretty much everything that we had already had going. So anyway, we've got the comments. Did we get anything from Conservation, Tavis?
I haven't received anything from Conservation.
Okay, all right. And so, I mean, our thought is that we really need to send this back to the Stormwater group, which is Brad, John, and myself, and take a look and maybe meet with these guys and see, you know, what their thoughts are. So, yep, go ahead.
So in the mix here, we have to understand that there were parts of the stormwater that were being utilized, and when Matt saw applications, he understood that there were certain aspects that needed better protections.
Right.
So everybody has to understand, we didn't reduce any protections, we added more protections. And I don't want to be disingenuous here, but I did spend a lot of time on this with Tavis, reviewing the document. I read the letter from Julie Brown, and I can be honest with you, I'm a little disappointed because there's stuff that was in our new document that this letter doesn't relate to much of it. It's a lot of hyperbole. What we need to do is we need to have them come in front of us so we can explain the document and how we got to the document rather than them throwing stuff at us that we sat in that room and we went over this stuff back and forth so that we could understand the value of the smaller footprint and burdening a smaller homeowner to develop a piece of land. Then we went to the larger scale, which creates slope and runoff, and we imposed stricter calculations for stormwater and their runoff. So I'm a little unsure of what the problems are, to tell you the truth.
Okay, well, that's why I thought it would be better if they sat down with a smaller group and we could have a discussion.
Would you like a motion that we
From Tavis first.
we adopt Tavis's recommendation in his memo of July 20 and do exactly what you suggested?
Okay?
I'll make that as a motion.
Okay, go ahead, I'll second the motion. Go ahead.
Thank you for the motion. I think the board has some more work to do. Through the comments that came in, there was concerns. There seems to be a general a general miscommunication. One, the new draft does not, quote unquote, throw out everything that the town had before. It achieves it a different way. I do think there was a bit of a communication breakdown. I wasn't aware of the original process that led to the authorship of the existing stormwater regulations. I also think those that work so hard on the existing stormwater regulations believe that they're currently in use, and they aren't. It's just not happening. So Kathy, when I told her that the first time, made a very concerned face. But when you, and you should be, because you are doing stormwater as a planning board, but what you're not seeing is actually all of the filled out appendices in the current regulations. Most people don't know how to do that. Most people also don't realize that when you implement a HydroCAD program that most of the engineers are using today, you get the same answer without going through the form. So you are getting the information, but quite literally, people are not using the stormwater regulations. The very first thing I noticed is that it requires in the current regulations, it requires that every site plan or every project that disturbs 10,000 square feet of land requires a stormwater management plan signed off by the planning board. It does not describe what the planning board is reviewing. There's no mechanism. Currently, the only way to get to a planning board is the site plan or a subdivision regulation. There is no mechanism for the board to simply do a stormwater management plan review. So I think it is, I think it would be advantageous to have the stormwater committee meet, invite members from Wolfeboro Waters, Wentworth Waters to show up. I actually have, if not the author, the 90% author of the draft regulations that can help dispel, there were concerns raised as a shift. We're not looking at phosphorus anymore, we're looking at nitrogen. There's a reason for that. There's also a reason these regulations work for lakes as well as saltwater bodies. There's a reason these regulations are very easy for communities to use. It takes the burden off the planning board. It goes back to the earlier discussion on the engineers submitting, the third party reviewing. And I actually have prematurely reached out to Ty Bond, and they're willing to pick that up in addition to their existing contract to review all of these stormwater plans. The other key discussion, and it's not in Julie's memo, but they had a brief phone call with her. I don't want to paraphrase her or her group inappropriately, but there's a lot of interest in some on having the stormwater regulations apply to single-family homes, particularly in the shorefront residential areas.
And that is not what this is all about.
Correct.
Right.
And I have not heard any interest from the planning board in going into single-family development. So there is going to be some things to work out. One is the 10,000 square foot of disturbance area. One is single-family, not single-family, shorefront, not shorefront. So I think it's worth the extra step to have a committee meeting or two to say, this is how we got to where we are. Yes, I agree. There was a lot of time that went into the draft before it came to the planning board. But there's a process, and I've learned in Wolfeboro, the process is as important as the outcome. So.
Okay.
I would actually suggest that one statement, which I don't know the answer to, but it says also the fact that there are no standards of how and when waiver applications should be submitted and no standards for granting waivers. I think that's something that needs to do, and maybe it's clearly written.
There's actually 3 paragraphs that introduce how one may request a waiver, and then it puts effectively the conditions one has to meet. So I know you don't have it in front of you. There's 2 or 3 introductory paragraphs,
If it's there, then it just needs to be transferred.
But it's more important than that. At the end of that, it said the planning board may grant a waiver. And in granting a waiver, they have to demonstrate that the following 4 things have been achieved. Those 4 things that have to be achieved are currently what the planning board is doing in its site plan review. And even if they meet those 4 things, the planning board reserves the right not to grant the waiver because proximity to a prime wetland or proximity to another project or suggestion from Public Works that something looks askew.
So obviously, this is a miscommunication on how they're reading. So we need to make sure that they understand how we're doing.
Well, I think it's most important the planning board understand how it works. But I don't think it hurts to do some extra outreach to let everyone know that the planning board isn't just throwing out all the rules.
The planning board has commissioned a stormwater management subcommittee to manage its concerns and develop a document which will then be explained to us so that the rest of us who are not experts in stormwater management can wrap our minds around it, see whether we feel that due diligence has been done and accept it and pass it and move on.
Okay, so there's a motion on the floor and a second. The motion was to send this to the Stormwater Regulation Committee. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, all right, thank you. Okay.
I would anticipate as a follow-up to that, probably September, October, having some resolution on that. Because I think in essence, there are no stormwater regulations right now. So it's very important that this make it to the next warrant cycle. Even though it's only site plan review, I think it needs to be treated with the urgency as though it needs.
Well, there are some regulations. It's on it's on our website.
Correct.
And you're saying nobody's following them?
It says that everyone that disturbs 10,000 square feet needs to do a stormwater management plan for approval by the planning board. It doesn't prescribe how one gets said plan to the planning board.
Yeah, okay, all right.
So people are doing it, but they're achieving it through other things. The shoreland regulations are capturing a lot of it. Site plan is catching a lot of it.
Okay.
All right, good. Okay, Filter Bed Road,
The map.
the map.
Was one additional change. And I only noticed this when I looked really closely. If you look on the map on the right-hand side, proposed BSLLD, beg pardon, you cast your eye to the very top, a little bit of red that's right next to the brown. There are 1, 2, 3, 4 small parcels that abut the white where there's no color. It is. I'm sorry? No. The fourth chunk of red, which is larger than the others, that abuts the brown and the white, is village residential. So that should not be red. That should be green. Other than that, there's no problems with the map.
The only difference between this and the last time I brought this to the board, sorry, I'm not. You have to understand, in GIS right now, the tax parcels are not exact. What I'm trying to do, they're the 2017 tax parcels. No one has updated since 17 with the tax parcels. So the one piece, in the middle of the sea of red, there are 2 green trapezoidal pieces, or 1 triangle and 1 trapezoid. To the left of the bottom one, as the page is oriented appropriately, was not shown as red at the last meeting, and I've turned that red. The question is, what is the virtue of the island of green in the sea of red, or between the Pine Hill and the Bay Street Limited proposed?
If you look on the maps, it is 1 lot that is still village residential. Reason.
That's just a question for the board to consider. If there's a reason to put an island.
Well, it is still an island. That's the problem. It is an island currently. At least on all the maps that we saw. Yeah, that one. On all the maps that we got, that we downloaded from the web, that particular lot was left out of all the other ones for some reason. Because I questioned it, thinking, oh, it's the wrong one. And we looked it up, and it's there.
So I guess the question to the board is, does it still make sense to have this parcel not either be Pine Hill or Bay Street Limited?
It could go back to when the Bay Street the Bay Street district was made a couple of years ago. And there were some issues at that end of Pine Hill Road, if I remember correctly, that
Who is
some
this?
people didn't want to be included.
Is this,
Right.
is this the land bank?
The self-storage person.
I think it's the
He was-
self-storage.
he
I think
was
it's the
one that-
self-storage.
He was the one that did not want to be included. Right,
I think it's that one.
yeah.
But from a planning perspective, does it make sense to have an island of residential, of an island of one parcel?
No, none. But there was a reason that it was left.
Right.
Well,
This,
currently I understand it because it's residential all around it, but when it's now flanked by Bay Street Limited,
Is,
One here?
is there town water and sewer going by there? Is that how it is with
Yeah,
those the green ones she's talking?
right, I think.
Julie, could you, just excuse me, it's the
it's
hours.
the land bank parcel.
They're both the land bank parcels, and that's why they're green.
Yeah, right, right.
Oh, they both
So
okay.
it doesn't matter what they're zoned, is what you're saying.
Basically, doesn't matter.
Yeah,
Just like we changed the town parcel, the filter bed area, changed that red, but it doesn't really matter, it's town property.
right.
So, in other words, it can be changed in that zone and got into the zone?
Well, we don't want to, I don't want to change land bank zoning from what it is currently to Bay Street Limited Business District, because then I'm allowing uses on that land, even though it is land bank land and is probably exempt. This is going to be, it's an inappropriate use for the current use of the land, and it would open up a big mare's nest, a big hornet's nest anyway.
Okay.
It doesn't, we lose nothing by leaving it the way it is.
No, but the discussion you had, the board just had, is a complete understanding of why it's not a spot zone of residential being left. You're not protecting it for a residential project or something like that. You're protecting it because it's land bank.
Yeah.
And
We're basically not even protecting it, we're essentially leaving it alone.
correct. But
Because
what I didn't
that
want to do
was-
was be trying to explain this to people prior to ballot season on why this one piece was left as a solitary spot.
Well, now that you know that it's land bank, a really easy explanation.
Well, so why would it hurt land bank property to be zoned in this new zone, BSLBD?
Well, theoretically, it wouldn't. Sorry, practically, it wouldn't, because there's no one's going to be allowed to build a factory, whatever use would be allowed in that BSLD district. But theoretically, those uses allowed on Bay Street would be allowed there. We would then have to explain to the land bank people why we've made the change and why they don't have to worry. Or if we do nothing, we don't need to do any explanations.
Until there's a conservation easement on that land, which I think the Natural Resources Committee ended up suggesting all town lands should have a conservation easement on them. Until there's that, then risk. And so I would say that it needs a residential.
Yeah,
And actually, it was not part of what we were looking at anyway. It was not part of the Bay Street Limited District anyway.
Right. And so therefore,
it was out of what we were doing anyway. It's just colored the wrong color on this map.
It's colored the right color, it's just,
No, it was never red. It's not in the district.
Correct.
A question.
yep, go ahead.
So how's the town addressing Filter Bed Road adopted to commercial uses while it's a private road?
say again?
How does the town evaluate commercial uses on a private road? How do you get that?
Applicant would need to define the access to that road. They would probably need to dedicate a portion of it as road, private or otherwise, to clarify that they had access to that property.
So if nobody does that, then
Nobody builds it.
Right, and we know that the paved part of Filter Bed Road is a town road by prescription.
Okay.
So if it's a town road by prescription, it's a town road. So you can do on it whatever you're allowed to do on a town road. It hasn't been declared, but we've been using it as a town road for more than 20 years, and no one has said you can't. So it's by prescription, it's a town road.
Okay, so now that you have the boat storage up there, they built on their own driveway, basically. So anybody that builds past that asphalt has to,
Demonstrate access, legal right to access their
Yeah,
property.
yeah.
and what about the road, the improvements to the road?
I would imagine the planning board would require them to make improvements to said property to support the proposed structure.
Okay, we all set on this? Okay. All right, then when are we going to start the public hearings? Not until,
On what? I didn't hear the end of your public hearings on what?
yeah, for the warrant article, because this one is going to go in the town warrant.
Correct. I'll put it together, put a draft together for the next work session so we can have a public hearing as early as September.
Good.
Okay, I thought you have to have the public hearing.
Yeah, we got lots of time.
Yeah.
We have tons of
okay,
time.
All right, okay, good. Great,
We're early.
good. Okay.
Well, with this, I mean,
Great. Okay, the next item is the lighting committee. John?
The lighting committee has a document draft in your packet for your viewing purposes. The document, you have two aspects of the document. You have the general regulations and the site plan regulations, and you have the definitions to accommodate the site plan regulations. At the last meeting, you discussed the placing the notation to find the general regulations in the site plan regulations, and from that you were able to have the full access of all the definitions and less redundancy. In the back section, there was a bunch of suggested guidelines that were created, and a lot of those have been moved out because they have no solid standing, and they're not really part of this document anymore. So we tried to look at other regulations in other towns. We have basically a survey that we did in the town. When we look at most of the towns, the golden rule is a dark sky aspect, and how towns create that dark sky is through 100% fully shielded cutoff lighting. And we know our site plan regulations, when we build a new structure and based on the site plan regulations, all those lighting and fixtures are all complying well and give us a excellent product in our downtown. And when we look at the next level, we look at commercial establishments that are transitioning old technology to new technology. And the new technology is where LED comes in, and that was adopted back at a certain public vote, and when we allowed those styles of LED lights that permitted commercial establishments to retrofit and use those, what we're finding is that some of those establishments are retrofitting their old lighting and not coming into the planning office to see Terry when they probably should be. Under the circumstances, we have a loose arrangement there because our town isn't proactive to the point where we are out there chasing down and looking for the people that change their lights. So one of the things that we do look at is as a stronger situation is when you have residential with commercial. So you want to protect that commercial, that residential aspect, and those offensive lights that may be installed in the commercial area, that becomes more of a problem and an area for more concern. Then we get to the straight up residential area. And when we get to the residential area, we know that everybody has the general uses. You snow blow at night, you go out for your grill, you go out and walk your dog. One of the things that we wanted to do was we wanted to recognize that there's people out there that want and enjoy their dark sky. Whether or not you're a house on the lake and you're looking up to the mountain and they have that light up there. One thing we know by our documents and reviewing other towns and locations is the only way that you can achieve dark sky is to have 100% fully cut-off shielded lighting. And unfortunately, we know that a lot of homes don't have that aspect. So we're trying to find the harmonious point where people who want to have lights on all night long, we're making a requirement that either they have fully shielded cutoff lighting or their lights are on motion detector. And that's after 11 o'clock at night to coincide with the noise ordinance. And unfortunately, you do see new people that move into town, and you have older people who have lived into town, and there seems to, those two have to harmoniously come together. So we all voted in the committee to make that recommendation, and we're trying to, again, get that dark sky approach that all our communities are trying to strive for. So in the document, you'll see that in there also. One of the things that our lighting committee is also wrestled with is the what we call high mount replacements in parking areas, and some of those parking areas are town areas, and that brings us down to the Bridge Falls Path and our local railroad station and our park, Cape Park. So one of the things that we'd like to have the board consider is colors of LED lights. And LED lights colors make a big difference in that that effect of I don't know what you want to call it.
Ambiance.
Ambiance. And so that's the point where the board wasn't going to make that determination, the subcommittee wasn't going to make that determination, but we wanted the board to understand, and maybe they could view this type of a color chart and come up with some sort of a better boundary for this lighting regulation. And with that, we'd like to see somebody in the town, with whether or not it's Parks and Rec or Barry, to come in and give us a idea on what the Bridge Falls Path is going to possibly be like. What we have down there in Foss Field is we have white light, which is more of a security lighting down there because they're 125 feet apart. The current lights on the Bridge Falls path are only 75 feet apart, and they're closer together. And so it's, when you go to the railroad station, we have a type of an orangish soft light, which offers a beautiful setting, and we'd like to complement those and get a little input from our local government leaders on what they're going to select. So, anything else, Brad?
No, you said that quite well, John. Regarding the Bridge Falls path, I think during the meetings there, I said we're obviously having that designed by a lighting engineering firm, whatever how we want to call it there. We haven't seen any plans yet or anything on that. I would totally expect that we would want to do something along those lines, similar to what's down there in Back Bay there along the docks and around the the chamber building and that whole area, because it is a very nice, well lit, soft light there and stuff. And I think speaking to myself, that we'd want to continue that on through the Bridge Falls pathway. So
I have two comments, and one is associated with business owners in that they have an incandescent light bulb in a fixture, and they say, I'm going to replace it with an LED. First of all, they may not know they really have to get permission to do that. Second, they may not have any idea about the idea of a color temperature, which ends up telling you whether it's really glaring or whatever. And so I think that some of this is associated with letting people know what is out there. The other thing is that in some ways, the things which you're suggesting, especially for residential, is very much along the lines of what Natural Resources Committee had made as recommendations for viewscapes. And I think there was, we ended up putting together a pamphlet on this, and there was, at least at some time on this committee, absolutely no appetite for putting in regulations on how people are supposed to put up their lights. And so I think that I am in a complete agreement with what you're saying for residential. At the same time, the argument was made in the past, which ended up saying we don't want to tell people what they can do or what they can and can't do. And so this is, to me, an issue which we have to work out. I support what we have for lighting here, and I also look out to a light out here that's total glare, and it's obviously not putting light down at only at the horizontal. But those are some things which I think we have to work out.
I think you're totally right, Peter, with the replacement light bulb thing, because you can only get LEDs now or compact fluorescents, and when you take them home, you don't know what color they are, so you plug them in.
Right. The color is indicated on the outside of that container, but you may not have any idea what it means.
Not well. And it's a very surprising glare when you get the wrong ones. So I can see those being put like on the porch, because I don't like it in the house.
Travis,
Well, I was just going to add, and Peter stole my thunder a little bit, and that's fine. The guidelines that are in the current lighting regulations, it says at the back of your handout, remove guidelines from regulations, create flyer. The reason there's no flyer here is because the Natural Resources flyer came out and has much of that lighting. That's sort of in limbo as to what the flyer would have. Going into residential lighting, I want to be very clear that the proposed section on residential lighting 1 and 2 family is what the general regulations say right now. That's not new. Where it becomes a bit more of a concern, and along Peter's comments, is back a page where it says general lighting requirements. All lighting in the town of Wolfeboro is required to have full cutoff shielding. That does not mean the town is going to have the ability to go out and put a shield on everyone's house.
But that does mean if somebody comes in with a new single-family home and it has exterior lights on it, we can ask that they be shielded. Predominantly, what the planning board is going to be looking at, as ever, is the site plan review, which comes in under D on the next page under commercial lighting. The submission of the plans is all basically the same. Oh, I shouldn't leave this one. Residential lighting 1 and 2 family under C1. At the end, what the committee added was 11 p.m. So continuous lighting doesn't persist after 11 p.m. That's consistent with the noise ordinance. So the town gets darker and quieter at 11 p.m. Spotlights are generally, again, down in 2, spotlights, floodlights, and other security lighting, et cetera, et cetera. Continual lighting is prohibited. Where it becomes obnoxious is not when, I'll pick on Brad because he brought it up. He gets home at 6 o'clock at night. He's got 3.5 feet of snow in the driveway. He flips on the floodlight so he can snow blow his driveway. That's fine. You can't leave it on all night long. So it's encouraging people to think about timers. It also plays into energy conservation and all sorts of benefits that way. To the not controlling how people light their properties is one of the reasons the exception is in there with the accent lighting, low wattage lighting. We're not getting into the snowmen, the snow globes, the illuminated jack-o'-lantern in the front lawn. All of that is the low wattage lighting that isn't restricted by the lighting regulations.
Any reason why that section's in italics?
That's the way it's currently written in the regulations.
Doesn't need to be there. Okay.
I tried to make things as soft a shift as possible. So that people,
Excuse me, Tavis, under that exception bit, does that include those stakes that you put in your yard that are solar powered?
I would say so. Most of those are downlit. There aren't too many solar-powered things that you can stick in your yard and up light. However, the planning board does have the ability to look at landscape and sign lighting that is uplit in the site plan review on the commercials.
These are temporary things you can like get at Walmart, and they're just like planted all over the yard.
Or the illuminated candy canes that people use along their driveway, or the illuminated reflectors so that you don't plow off your asphalt, things like that. Those would all be included in that. That's all I had.
So, as usual, I wonder about enforcement.
Yep.
So the enforcement mechanism before was a lot arduous because you had to go out and meter things, and basically it was a lot cleaner that you could just use a time frame at 11 o'clock at night. People can still do their stuff. They can have it on motion, or they still have their lights. They're just not going to cast a glare outward, because basically a lot of that stuff is, if you read the stuff that's struck out, that's basically what a lot of that stuff says. So really,
My neighbor has lights that come across my property. They're on all night long. And they do.
It's a nuisance. It's a nuisance complaint.
Was the police department?
Police department?
No, it's one sues thy neighbor.
And sues thy neighbor. The enforcement is up to the individual. That's it.
What we found in the research is you actually have to, in order for it to be a true lighting violation, there has to be almost all but physical harm by said nuisance.
that's the
Blinding
existing way.
light is a nuisance.
That's the existing way.
Because what I find too bright and you find too bright and John finds too bright.
And
I also don't have, I mean, if we want to go down that path, we can come up with something. Think of the noise ordinance. Right now, if you can hear it on the other side of the wall, we have no mechanism for the police department to go onto the property to the appropriate wall to determine if it's heard through the wall or not.
we understand.
And they're about the same spot if all of a sudden Vaughn's bedroom is across from somebody else's game room and somebody has the lights on, which reminds me of another element. One of the other stimuli behind going into the lighting regulations was the illuminated signs ? At the real estate offices. Not in this packet, but also recommended coming out of the lighting committee discussion was that the planning board has no foray on interior lighting. So one of the recommendations, then whether the board wants to reconvene the sign committee to do this or not, would be to remove, and I know I've reported on this before, remove one of the defined signs. Therefore, any sign that is not attached to the glass, i.e. inside the glass, is an interior lighting element and not subject to town review.
Issue open signs
Yep.
inside. What was the outcome?
And also
You can
lit
have it, but
signs
it
that were
can't flash.
inside.
They can't flash.
And it has to say open. Can't flash, but there was also, and probably still is, a thing that if I have a lovely lit sign, I could not put it near the window, but I could put it in the back of the room, and it would still blare right out in the parking lot. Somebody still does that. And they said that's okay because it's in the back of the room. But if they moved it up into the window, no, that's not okay.
So this is falling into the sign committee regime. Right now, we define signs etched in the glass or permanently attached or on the wall of a building or projecting from a wall of a
Not
building, et
inside
cetera.
glass. Even if the light is
Yeah, it should be.
projecting out.
Well, so
Regulated by
So, for example, if someone wants to sell real estate and across the Northeast, as many places as I've been, real estate offices, even in historic districts, seem to be shifting to these technically externally illuminated displays for real estate. They are not it's not a TV screen. It's essentially glass with a light around it. So it's externally illuminated, which actually meets the regulations. I digress.
Okay, so the next step with this would be for us to go through it page by page, I guess.
Is that what we're supposed to be doing next? Because I was prepared to do that tonight, so I'm
Yeah.
glad we're not going to, 'cause it's kind of late.
It was put on the agenda as a discussion point, and I anticipated the report being that we would reconvene the lighting committee to finalize the edits, which effectively occurred the other day, about an hour or so before I sent the email. So I did not expect the board to have line-by-line comments, so it can go to the August.
We're going to do this again?
Yes.
We're going to review these again?
Well, without the introductory discussion, we can just go
Go through them
line.
line by line and
Okay,
fix what needs to be fixed?
okay, thank you, John.
Just a couple of questions regarding these. You've incorporated site plan review regs into the lighting ordinances that are going to be in the regular zoning book, correct? This is now going to be 175 or 175-53-1. You've incorporated site plan review into those regs.
We took everything from the general regulations and mushed it into the site plan regulations.
Into site plan. This is
Correct.
going into site plan. This is not staying where it was currently. This is coming out of,
What stays and what's current is the lighting and illumination with the purpose and the reference to the site plan regs, and then you would jump into the site plan regs.
that would have been helpful if that had been specified on this form, because my assumption was that you've taken them out of site plan review, stuck them into the regular regs. My ultimate question was, are you going to put them back into site plan so they're going to exist in two places, or is this going to be simply one place in this regs?
The intent.
Now I know differently.
Well, 175-53.1 is lighting and illumination and the general provisions under Article 6.
Correct. And my assumption
So
was,
that is all that would remain with this proposal
that
in that
wasn't
section.
specified. Now I understand better. Okay, thank you.
And the other intent behind that is that anytime the board needs to adjust the lighting regulations in town, it's a site plan regulation public hearing that would then carry across. Instead of having to wait, something horrific shows up, you need to wait a year to change the lighting regulations.
It makes logical sense now.
Oh, okay, so we're going to put this on in August then. Oh, okay. Okay, all right, impact fee update.
The only update I was going to provide is I was told by the town manager that the budget was not, and we discussed this very briefly earlier, the budget for '21 was not going to accommodate the Part 2 of the impact fee work, and that's something I should plan on budgeting for 2022. And I'm currently reaching out to Mayberry to see if that is something he is amenable to, and I will report back as soon as I hear from him on that to the board.
Let's hope he is.
Okay, and then one other additional item, Tavis and I were going to go to the Board of Selectmen tomorrow about the short-term rentals and the issue of the police following up on noise complaints. Linda Murray got in touch with me and said that really we need to go to the police commission first and have a discussion with them and then come back to the Board of Selectmen. So Tavis and I have got to set up a time to go to the police commission, and then we will report back to you. Let's see, that is everything. We don't have any public, but we do have some minutes. How about if we put those off until the next meeting and adjourn now, because the two people down at the end were here until midnight last night, so.
Poor MJ's been sitting here waiting to hear you espouse the virtues of her minutes.
Oh, they want us to fit?
I would like to make a motion on the July 8 minutes.
Oh, okay.
And the motion is going to state, with thanks to Mary Jane Shelton, recording assistant, for a clear and accurate recording of complex statements by the public at an important public forum.
Oh, okay, well then, is that a motion then?
That's a motion, and I'm
Okay,
waiting on a second.
so I'll second that.
Thank you.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Notice,
got one of
Mr.
them.
Hodder, she's
That was
not
a
writing
tough
this
one.
down.
That was a tough set of minutes to do.
Yes, but that was
So
well done.
July 6th is going to the next meeting.
But we haven't done the other one either. so
Okay, well,
let it go.
does anybody have any comments about the July 6th? No. Okay. You may.
I move to accept the
okay, and
July
I'll-
6th
I'll second it.
draft minutes.
Oh, aye.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
are we
Okay, all right. Okay, so somebody want to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay,
Seconded.
and all in favor? Aye.
I could have been
Thank you. Thanks, folks. Sorry, guys, at the end there that we kept you past. You want me to follow you home, Mary Jane?
So I rode the bike. Oh, it's nice. Full moon, bugs flying up.